Hey guys. Hello everyone. It looks like there's a couple folks who are here already. If you have a YouTube account, feel free to say hi, let me know you're here in the chat. Um, I'm super excited to be doing this. It is my first ever live stream, other than the test that I did yesterday with my friends and my mom, so that doesn't count. So please forgive any weird technical glitches that happen because I'm like, I don't know about this whole tech thing, but I don't know. We're living in a virtual world now, so I'm like, let's give this a go. Um, but just wait a couple of minutes. Oh, thanks, guys, who gave the thumbs up. Just to see who else filters in. And yeah, I'm starting here in my living room, just kind of chilling out, hanging on the floor. At some point, one of the questions that someone sent to me ahead of time is something that I'll go into my studio for. So if you guys want to see my craft studio, it is probably the most unearthquake friendly thing in Los Angeles County. But yeah, you'll be able to kind of see that studio. My cats may or may not make an appearance. There was a question about the cats, so I probably will bring them out here so they can say hi. Yeah. Oh, also, as you chat, you can feel free to toss questions to me. If somebody says hello and you know who they are, you can chat at them. That's fine. From what I understand from other folks who've done live streaming, I think you can at me. So do at Blue Buddha Boutique, and that'll make your comments stick out on my view of the chat. So I'll be able to see like, hey, there's something that somebody really wants me to respond to. I don't actually know if that works, but yeah, I think that's what's supposed to happen. So yeah, I hope you guys are all, and yeah, once again, welcome and thanks. I want to start out with a question that someone messaged me on Facebook with toward the very end of last year, and it has to do with vending at craft fairs. There's actually a few parts to this question, and that's the whole reason why I'm doing this live stream, is because I wanted to have a way to respond to the question, to have people, ask other questions if they have it. And yeah, originally I was going to do a webinar or something, and then I was like, that's too complicated. Everybody has YouTube, everybody knows YouTube, so I'm just going to do it like that. All right, so the question was, for a long time now, I have been lucky that I have been the only chain mailer selling in my area. I have lots of great and loyal customers that always come find me and buy from me at the fairs and markets that I do. Over the last couple of years, there have been a few other mailers that have come into the field. When I saw them, I went over, said hi, tried to be pleasant and nice, but kind of got the cold shoulder, so I kept away. That's not a for you, person who wrote this. That's a for the people who did that to you. I did notice they are selling their pieces for 50% less than my prices. Now, it has taken me about 5 years to get prices to where I feel comfortable. How do I deal with this? The general public doesn't always see the product for what it is and the time that has gone into making it. They just look at the price. I've also noticed the fairs where other mailers are present, my sales have dropped about 30%. It kind of makes me feel sad because I love doing what I do and really don't want to give it up. I was just wondering if you had any advice, as you have a lot of experience. Thanks for your time. So yeah, I have a few thoughts about this, and obviously it feels very weird to be answering this question now when there are absolutely no art fairs happening. And the world is strange right now, but there will be art fairs again. So yeah, and some of the things I'll say can be applied to many different types of businesses, and also selling venues, not just specifically, let's say at an art fair, but even like for a website or Facebook presence. So first off, let me talk about the hey, I went over and said hi and tried to be pleasant and nice. So it's been my experience that like maybe 80-90% of chain mailers are super sweet, super awesome, and super nice. I mean, if you ever see me vending anywhere, please come over and say hi, because I would love to geek out with you and talk about all the pretty shiny things and yay chainmail. So yeah, so I love geeking out with other chain mailers. Most other chain mailers that I do are totally excited about that. And and I'm excited about it, even though it's a business, right? I am there to sell and to do business. And sure, I would be annoyed if I'm in the middle of dealing with a customer making a sale and somebody comes over and is like, "Oh, I make chainmail too. Look what I can do." Blah 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 blah. But I'm sure that's not what you did. I have met a couple of chainmailers who aren't really interested in interaction with other chainmailers, and I mean, to each their own. I find that I think your response of like, so I kept away. Yeah, that's pretty much all I do, right? Sometimes people just aren't going to want to, interact. They may be, they may just really have a feeling of like, hey, I'm here to do business. Don't, I don't know, protective, of what they have going on. So, whatever. Yeah, I'm like, okay, not worth my energy. Thank you for making that clear. And then, yeah, move on. But hopefully, most of the people that you will encounter will be nice. I'm really sorry if most of them were not. That's sad and unfortunate. So, yeah. In terms of selling their pieces for 50% less and prices and all of that, yeah, so I agree with you. The general public does not always see the product for what it is and the time that has gone into making it. A lot of people still don't really know what chainmail is, or if they know, they don't necessarily understand it. There's a few things that you can do to try and get people to have that understanding. You can have, if you have the capacity to have like a small, tablet with a display that's actually like on a loop, shows somebody making chainmail. Have a little sign. It's all made one ring at a time. Most people don't read signs, or then your booth can get kind of cluttered with signs. So I like to tell people as they come in, like, hey, yeah, everything's handmade one ring at a time. Sometimes I'll be able to be working on a piece. That can be tough if it's just me in the booth and it's a pretty steady crowd, because then I don't like to, be focused down when I really am trying to like make eye contact with people who are walking by. But you can I always certainly have my pliers out there and ready to go, so that I can, just kind of whip them out in a second and start making things. Because I think when people see it, then they really begin to understand, oh, right, that's like, it's this whole thing. They have to open and close one ring at a time. Their minds are kind of blown by that. But yeah, some people just look at the price. There's a wide variety of markets and art fairs and craft fairs and community community organizations, church shows, block parties, and everything is geared with a different audience in mind. So, it's interesting. My work probably is too diverse of a price point. I have some super basic earrings for like $14 that, have like 4 rings in them. And then my more expensive pieces are, in the hundreds of dollars or more. And so I try and pick and curate depending on the show that I'm doing and what the target audience is. But still, I've also done a show where I've had people tell me my prices are too low, and people tell me my prices are too high at the exact same show. So it's that's kind of interesting. I think that a lot of people do shop by price, and for other people, price isn't an issue, and for them, having something that just really captures. I want to say like, I don't know, that captures emotion. People are emotional shoppers. So when you're in your booth, in addition to, being able to tell the story of like, hey, I'm the artist behind it. This is how this is made. It's, a whole process from like taking the wire and coiling it and cutting it, and then you assemble it. And if there's any anodizing that happens, but also just having an emotional outward story, like a brand packaging, essentially. So you can, I would say, if you haven't already done this, look at a bunch of different craft fair booths. You can do this. Obviously now you have to do it virtually online, but otherwise you can, spy on shows. Just go there and look around, see what people are doing in their booths, see which booths you look at, and you're like, whoa, I just totally want to, step right in. Or other ones that you're like, wow, there's nothing remarkable about this at all. Because you do need to capture people's attention, and then you do need to find ways to make your booth different from somebody else. So that way, to a customer, they're not just like, oh, wait, this is just chainmail again. They will have a very distinct, oh, that's this chainmail artist versus, that chainmail artist. They'll just have a very clear idea in their mind. And so that can just be done with consistent branding, the colors that you use, having a really neat and clean booth. And there's tons of different ways to do this. A lot of it just has to do with, what your personal aesthetic is. But you do need to find some way to differentiate yourself. Because otherwise, if you don't, that's when people are just shopping on price, because to them, they're like, oh, well, this is all the same. So I'm just going to go with with the cheapest. So if you are able to really, bring people in with, whether it's color or just minimalistic style, but just some aesthetic that you're like, oh yeah, this is me, this is my jewelry. And in addition to that, I highly recommend having a couple of showpieces that are out. Oh, that's weird. I see this message that's like, hey, your stream is unstable. Please wait while we connect. So if there's weird streaming issues going on, I apologize. Hopefully nobody's dropped off. But yeah, I don't know what that's all about. I think the whole world is on the internet right now, so things are a little twitchy. So when I was in Chicago, the power that I made was a good showpiece, because people would see it and they're from Chicago, most of them, so they would instantly recognize, oh yeah, I know what this is, and people would come up and be like, oh, actually, I work right there. And so having something like this, that's a conversation piece. This is something that or chainmailer that I know of actually has it. But yeah, like this is something that would get people talking. So yeah, and thanks, Don, for saying that it's a cool piece. It's one of my favorites. It's a little crooked and wonky, but yeah, but I love it. The other piece that I have that's more recent is this square here, which I like to keep out and then have it like this, so that people, like, encourage them to like touch it and feel it, so they can just have that tactile experience that chainmail is. And that's also a great differentiator. Anytime you have something that people can touch, although, nowadays with COVID-19, I have a feeling the culture of touch at booths and the tactile sensation might wind up changing, and people might be a little more hesitant to touch things that everybody else has touched. So yeah, that's my disclaimer, is prior to 2020, just having something tactile in the booth was great, but certainly something visual, something that will draw people's attention, something that will have them remember you. And so it's weird, because that may not be something that you're actually selling or that's for sale. But the thing is, people will see it and be like, oh, wow, like that person, like, look at that talent, look at that skill. So whatever your showpiece does is it elevates your status as an artist in their eyes. And then that is almost like allowing you to charge higher prices than somebody else would, just because they're like, oh, I can see, like, they're talented, so therefore they can command these prices. And the other thing is to own your prices, to never be apologetic about it. I know pricing is such an issue. And I also I understand the struggle of, hey, like I used to be the only person, and now there's like other chain millers coming in. I understand that full well from back when I was in Chicago. Since when I started, there was pretty much one other chain mailer in Chicago proper. There were certainly folks doing the Renaissance Fair circuit who had been around longer than either of us. Um, and that's the one in Chicago was Melissa Banks of Wrapped in Mail, who's an amazing chainmail artisan. And our work is different. It's always surprising to me when there's a couple of customers or people that would be at a craft fair walking around and be like, oh, um, that's just like Wrapped in Mail, talking about me, or to her like that's just like Blue Buddha, back when I was selling under the Blue Buddha name instead of my own. But most people really recognize like, oh yeah, we're completely different styles and aesthetics. Um, and I think that's really what color fades. And so whatever it is that you decide you want to specialize in, whether that's a particular design or a cause, or there's a few different things that you can go with, and there's tons of different marketing resources you can look into to find that out. But yeah, just have something that's like, oh yeah, that's me. And pricing is tricky, right? Like some of my work is priced pretty high, and that's because I wholesale. There are some pieces that I absolutely cannot wholesale, because then I would never be able, I shouldn't say I would never be able to sell them. They'd be a really hard sell, just because they would be priced way higher than 99.99% of the people would want to pay. And what I mean by wholesaling is that I sell to stores, so shops, museum shops, and they're buying my work at usually about 40 to 45% of the retail price. So that way they can mark it up. They can also give a 10% discount without that really hurting their bottom line too much. And so that's not something that everybody is going to do or everybody is going to want to do. But I highly suggest, if you can, work wholesale pricing into your pricing. So as you're pricing, price as though you are wholesaling, because that helps give you a healthy enough margin and buffer that you can handle discounts, or you could handle it if the just out of the blue was like, hey, I'd like to buy 100 bracelets for who knows what reason, but then you're able to fill that order and not feel like, oh, I wish I would have charged a little bit more because now I'm really only making like $1 per bracelet, and that's not enough. Yeah, I think one other thing that I want to touch on this before I go to the next question is when I was talking about figuring out like what makes you different, what's the story of your brand. Part of what your story is, and part of also your target market, a great way to get that across is something that I have not done. So I will say that I know it is something that's really, really effective, is lifestyle photography. So if you look at a ton of brands that you admire, brands that are at higher price points, they have a very specific look, and that look carries across through their different marketing, their social media, their websites. And by lifestyle photography, I mean specifically people wearing the jewelry in a specific situation. So is your jewelry, like, is it beach jewelry? Great, show people on the beach, laughing, smiling, sitting in the sun. They're, the wind is blowing their hair a little bit. So there's that. If you're more of a, more of a dystopian future cyberpunk thing, okay, then you're probably not going to be at the beach. You're probably going to be wearing black, maybe a little dusty. Maybe you'll have some spikes. You'll, Mad Max sort of aesthetic. And so those are each targeting very different people. And then you to do with my own jewelry brand. And at this point just have not, since it is one of those things that like other things are taking priority. But I'm hoping to get to that. And even, I may try, and now that it's everybody's stuck inside for a while, I can't actually set up a photo shoot. But I was like, oh, I bet there are also models stuck at home with nothing to do. So I may be able to just, do essentially like a virtual long distance photo shoot. So that's something to consider. So yeah, so I hope that you don't give up what you're doing. I know that, right now things are going to be really tough. Jewelry is likely not going to be in demand as much since people are staying home, and most people sadly don't put on jewelry and get dressed up just to stay at home. But I think we should encourage that at least like once a week. Is like, hey, get dressed up, just do it for yourself, be excited, be happy. But yeah, so I hope that, this may be a little bit of downtime for some of us, but I hope you can use that time to craft and to, if you don't have a showpiece and you're like, oh yeah, I do want to have a showpiece that, highlights my aesthetic and my story that I can use to draw people in and to elevate me as an artist, then now is a great time to tackle something like that and work on it. So I hope I answered your question. But if you have follow-up questions to that, you can feel free to let me know. You can also write something in the chat and I'll see it right away. The next question that came in was, when do I become a male artist? Not a dabbler or an imitator or a hack or something else, like just a male artist. That's also a great question. And I don't know that I have an answer for you other than you're an artist when you say you're an artist. And some people are going to absolutely disagree with me on that. But, calling yourself an artist is not something that's regulated in the same way as like, you can't just start calling yourself a doctor, right? Like you can get in trouble if you just call yourself a doctor. But there's, no government people that are going to come after you if you're like, I'm an artist. And yeah, this is kind of a silly analogy. But like, I even call my cat an artist because he shreds toilet paper, and we're like, oh, look, the artist at work again. And I'm half joking because it's also, he's not purposefully creating it. He's just, being a cat. But, art is so subjective and it means different things to different people. So I would say, and there's a really good quote in my studio. I'm going to try and remember to show that when we go into my studio later. I think if I can remember correctly, it's something like, remember there are people out there less qualified than you doing the things that you want to do simply because they chose to believe in themselves. And so I thought that was pretty cool and powerful. And I would say that, I started calling myself a chainmaille artist pretty quickly after I got into calling yourself an artist. Then sit down a little bit and try and figure out, what is that coming from? Is that fear that you're not good enough? Are you comparing yourself to other people on the internet and saying like, oh no, I could never do that. I could never do that. Because that's something that is hard to avoid if you're on social media at all and scrolling past, everybody's highlights of what they've done, and they're usually sharing really awesome stuff. But just put everybody else aside and don't think about them and just think about you, and figure out where is that coming from? Like, what is keeping me from calling myself a chainmaille artist? And if you're able to come up with an answer to that, if you're like, oh, well, it's because I feel like, I can follow other people's patterns and weaves, but I've never invented one of my own. Okay, so then think about it. If you invented something of your own, would you feel comfortable calling yourself an artist? Maybe the answer is yes, maybe the answer is no. If the answer is no, then keep poking and prodding and figuring out what would it take for you to feel comfortable with that. And let's say that was the answer. You're like, I've never invented my own weave. I've just, I look online, I see what other people do, and then, I duplicate. Um, Great. So make that a challenge for yourself. Just sit down and say, like, all right, I'm going to play around with rings. I'm going to put stuff together, and I'm going to keep trying until I get something that I'm happy with. And I say, I'm going to keep trying until I get something that I'm happy with, because sometimes it takes an awful long time. I would say a good ratio is to imagine like 10 failures for everything that actually works out. And probably, even 20 or more failures for everything that's like amazing. uh, there's the people who succeed at things generally have, well, I guess by rule, have failed more than people who never try. So that may be one way to frame things in your mind, to look at it. Because believe me, I know it's frustrating. One of the things that I hate about being a creative person is the days when I am like, okay, I'm going to sit down and create. I've blocked off my whole morning to do this. I'm going to do something new and it's going to be awesome. And then 3 hours later, I just have tangles of rings and nothing has worked out. And I feel like I wasted 3 hours. So I don't know if that's happened to any of you, but it does happen to me. And, all I can say is, okay, well, that happened. Let me try and learn from every single mistake. I do try and learn. I try and label my mistakes so that I don't try them again. And yeah, and just kind of know like that is part of the process and that is part of being an artist. Maybe that's also why artists can sometimes be prone to depression, is because we spend hours and hours failing. Affirmations, and by that I mean just in the morning, saying statements about yourself, and things that you're going to do. Just call yourself an artist. Like, I am an artist. Look at yourself in the mirror, look right into your eyes. Like, I am an artist. You can say your name. I, Rebeca Mojica, am an artist. And talk about how that makes you feel. I, Rebeca Mojica, am an artist. I enjoy creating new things every single day. I'm happy creating new things. So put an emotion in that. So that may be something that you might want to do. But yeah, I say just own the title, call yourself an artist, and know that some people who call themselves artists, there's always going to be trolls. So you can be, and that actually goes with like sort of the better and more renowned you get, the more trolls you get, the more haters you get. So if you're just starting out and you're calling yourself an artist, probably no one is going to call you out and be like, no, actually you're not. As you get bigger, you will get trolls. It was probably a few months ago, maybe. And I haven't had a Facebook account for a while. So I really miss the chainmaille Facebook group on Facebook, but I can't join through my business account. So I haven't been able to look at it. So I don't know if other people had this experience, but there was somebody who sent me a message on my website through my website form. And I was like, oh, this person's got a bone to pick. I bet they're doing this with a bunch of people. And it was just this very nasty message about like, I'm sick of chainmaille people calling themselves artists. You just assemble things and then, use pre-made stuff and throw on a clasp and blah, blah, blah. I don't even remember what it said because I was just like, whoo, delete. So, I call myself an artist. I own that title. And there are people who are going to disagree with that and whatever, that's on them. So Yeah, so that's what I have to say about that. Um, in order to answer the next question, which is how can I become more creative, innovative in what I'm making when I don't have an infinite amount of sizes to experiment with, which is a great question. I'll take you over to my studio and we'll look at a few things that are there. I'm also bringing my tea. And then if you're watching this, sorry, it may get a little dizzy for a minute as I walk into the other room. And so here is my craft studio, which, as I said, is not the most earthquake friendly because that's where I sit right there at that table, and you can see if that big, huge locker were to fall on me. There's where I do a lot of photography, shipping supplies, kits ready for sale. I'm sure it's going to be backward because I'm using my webcam, but there's that really awesome quote that I had. Yes, there are people less qualified than you doing the things you want to do simply because they decide to believe in themselves, period. I don't know who wrote it. I found it on Instagram and thought it was pretty amazing. And then, of course, here in the corner is the supervisor. There's usually 2 supervisors in here, which is why it's a dog bed and it's so big. But yeah, you probably can't see it so much on her paw, the little missing fur. They both had surgery this past week, and they each had 6 teeth removed. So they're still recovering, and they usually fight after they get back from the vet. So that is that's a bummer. They're kind of avoiding each other now, since that one there's Zila is usually hissing at the other one, who's her dad, but she gets really mad when they come back from the vet. Okay, so getting creative with without having a bunch of different sizes. Okay, so first off, I would say this is something that comes easier to some people than others for sure. But it goes back to just getting comfortable with playing around and being comfortable with failures. And as Don commented a while ago, he's like, yes, learn from the failures. So one simple way to get creative as well is, this is one of my favorite things, but so this is a Viper scale. And then this is Viper scale. Well, actually, I should say it's Viper scale 2.0. So I've added this little extra ring here going down the middle of the spine, the tinier one. And then this is also Viper scale 2.0, but now I've also added some edging. And so adding edging to things is something that even if you only have a couple size rings, you can probably find some way to add. Ways to experiment is to make a weave I already know. Helm chain is really great. For me, it's easier to work with weaves that are flat, Japanese, in the Japanese family often, because there's a lot of negative space. So you can take that negative space and you can just join things in new and different ways. You can take, I should have had what the actual bullseye looks like, but I don't. So yeah, this does have a lot of ring sizes in it, which I realized was not quite the question. But this is my bullseye weave, and I just created 2 really long strands of it, and then I zipped them up together and joined them. And so all of the ring sizes are in bullseye. So I didn't take any extra new ring sizes from that. At least I don't think I did. I made this a while ago. I just used a few different colors. And then the back side looks a little bit different here. So if you have a kit, that's a great way to get started, and then combine it with, just a pack of a bunch of common ring sizes that you have, and you can just play. You can figure out, you can experiment with like folding things in on themselves. This is, okay, my workstation. we'll do this. So this was something I was playing around with. It's one of the Not Dao weaves, and it's sort of like a reversible piece. But anytime you have a unit of something, so just a small little unit here, you can play around with attaching. Sorry, my chair is making funny noises. I don't know if you can hear that, but um, you can play around with attaching the units to each other in different ways. Um, I think really the main thing is just to sit down and play. And I realize that almost sounds easier said than done, but I think it's similar to, advice that's always given to writers. Like, okay, well, just sit down and don't just stare at that blank piece of paper or the computer screen for a while. Just start writing. And I think it's the same thing with chainmail. Just start weaving. Weave something and then try adding rings to it. Try subtracting rings. You can try adding beads. Just play around and and see what will happen. And I guess while we're here, I'll show you other things that are on my table right now. Because one of the questions is, are you working on any big projects? The answer to that is pretty much no, yes. So I'll explain that in a minute. But in the meantime, we have a couple of um, pieces. So this is something that I made years ago. It was going to be in my book, which I'm probably not doing another book, but maybe I'll wind up writing. I'll write more PDF instructions and maybe some video tutorials. But this is just kind of a fun little piece. I'll try and get it pretty close up there. And I don't know what I was going to do with this. Is maybe make a few different ones in different colors, but yeah, I have a lot of like these little random doodads that I was trying to uh, just make fun things with. This one I really like. I might wind up figuring out some way to connect a bunch of these into a bracelet or do a necklace or pendant or something. Um, and then here's a good example of when I was like, hey, just add rings. So the Celestial Swirl, which is here, and I'll this came out in a magazine project, but I'll likely be releasing it as a PDF with some kits later on this year. So I also was like, oh, let me try and make even a bigger sun. So I did add more and more rings on this, and then at some point, I actually even had, I think, a few more, and then it got to be too much, and I was like, oh, okay, that was even too much for me. So I'm starting to pull it back a little bit, but yeah, that's also something that happens is like, let me add these things, and then it doesn't work. And here's also a failed experiment that it just doesn't hold its shape really well. I was trying to find something that would incorporate the scales in an unusual way. So kind of like this. I thought actually as a necklace it would look really pretty, but unfortunately it doesn't quite work and hold its shape the way I wanted it to. So this is one of my failed experiments. And some of my failed experiments I wind up giving away when I do the, hey, here's my bag of doodads that I occasionally will sell. And then other mistakes I'll hang on to and keep because I'm like, I really wish I could find a way to make this work. It's not working just now, but maybe I could find something. So yeah, so I do hang on to a lot of my mistakes to try and figure out how to make them work. And then the next thing that I'm working on is this. So that's the Celtic filigree. And somebody had requested this particular color scheme. I think I'm going to add more black to the back, take out some of these violet rings and switch them with black so that there's like a rocker chic on one side and then the berry on the other side. So yeah, so this is the and right. So in terms of big projects, I do want to make another quilt piece. Unfortunately, right now I'm having I was in physiotherapy for tendinosis in my elbows, and then I was diagnosed with trigger finger. Sorry for shaking that camera here. For trigger finger in this finger. Uh, I'm not sure if that's actually what it is. I was given a cortisone shot, but that didn't seem to do anything. And so the surgeon was like, oh, well, call me if that doesn't, and we'll figure things out. But then the eclipse happened, so I don't know when it is that I'll be able to go back there to get it checked out. It doesn't actually hurt when I weave, which is the strange thing. But I have a little bit of like just kind of pain here, so it's that tendon underneath and this. But yeah, it just kind of hurts all the time. And so even though weaving itself doesn't seem to specifically aggravate it, I am trying to give it as much rest as I can. So for at least a few weeks, I'm trying to hold myself back from doing all of the chainmail, which, of course, now that I'm home all of the time, I want to do all of the chainmail. Uh, but I do want to make another one of those, essentially like the quilt squares. So like that colorful one that you saw in the living room. But I want to just make a few more of those in different color schemes, and eventually maybe even do like a 4 elements one, so it shall go together. And those I plan out on my computer in Photoshop. So at least I can do that before I wind up sitting down to weave it, because that takes it still takes a good like 8 hours to plan it all out. So uh, one other thing that I'll show, and then oh yeah, so somebody had asked how the kitties are. So you heard about the kitties, Apollo and Zila. Anybody who remembers Zed, and I will pop up to photo of Zed. Ta-da! So you guys may remember this cat. He was our mascot at Blue Buddha. Hi, Zed. That's the vicious Zed. That's the friendly Zed. So unfortunately, Zed passed away at the end of last year. And Zed was not mine, but I was very, very close to Zed. So I miss Zed, but his head will live on. We used to hide his head in ads that we would have in magazines. So if you ever have some of our old magazine ads, you can always see if you can find his head in them, because that was what we did. Okay, so let's see if I can get this to work. This was something, you can probably see it. I don't know if that just made it way too bright. It's probably all right. So I'll move it a little bit. There we go. Oops. There we go. Okay. So I weave Half Persian 4-in-1 in a pretty way. So this may be entertaining for some of you to see, because let's see. I'm trying to see what's going to be the best way to do it, because you probably can't see it very well from that angle. But this is one reason I think why I can weave Half Persian for thing of let me pick up a ring here with the hand that I'm holding the weave with, while I'm also using my pliers to pick up the next open ring. So I will often do I'll often do a scoop, like, hey, let me scoop a ring. But because this closed ring actually winds up going on second, which I'll show you a better close-up of in a second, I can't do it the way I normally would. But I've had a couple of people kind of ask me about this over the years, and it's definitely a fun one to weave and to do. So let's see if I can kind of face around this way. At some point, I'll actually have a camera or a phone on a tripod, so that makes it easier. So I go through one, and then I add that, and then I go through the other two. Oh, that's awesome. Amy's like, hey, I'm weaving Half Persian 4-in-1 now. Yeah, I love weaving Half Persian 4-in-1, actually. It's one of my favorite weaves. I'll try and show this to you again and see if I can find a way to get even closer without, like, my elbow taking up the whole thing. And also, so my wrist is doing this weird curve. Let me try to go around this way. Okay. So I go through that one and then drop that on. and then go through those two like that. Ta-da. A way view, but at least it's comfortable for me weaving. And yeah, I know our tutorial doesn't show how to do it this way. I think at some point when I was doing the ones with rubber rings, especially, because then you don't have to stop and close this second ring that I've picked up. But yep, this is essentially my way of weaving it. And now that I'm so used to it, it's sometimes harder for me to go back and weave it in other ways. And then every now and then, right, so these two rings are stuck together, so I'll just close the one that's hanging, and then we'll drop it off. And it's funny, I know a lot of folks don't like it when rings come and some of them are attached like in pairs. I mean, nobody likes like the big giant tangle of rings. I don't like that. But if there's just two rings together or even three, I actually don't mind, especially if it's a weave that requires closed rings, because then I'm like, great, it's a lot easier just to close these and they're all together, and then I'll open up one to drop off the closed ones, and then I've got closed ones that are ready to go. So for me, I like that. All right, the last question. Oh, that's pretty good. I wanted to have this for about 45-ish minutes to an hour. So we were doing good. One last thing is, yay, good news. I will be able to ship orders again. I am going to keep my shipping down to probably going to the post office no more than twice a week. So just to limit my my time outdoors aren't essential. You can still go to the post office for non-essential reasons. So I'm like, okay, that's great. So I'm going to be doing that. And at first, I thought I might need to hold off for a while because there was for a couple of well, yesterday and the day before, I was coughing a little bit, and it was just a cough. It was nothing else. I have no other symptoms. But now, like, is the time where you get a cough and you're like, whoa, what's going on? But I feel fine and I haven't really coughed today. So I'm like, okay, that's great news. I'm still going to be on the safe side and, wait a little bit. Since I have a friend who's a nurse who's like, hey, symptoms are showing up in all sorts of crazy ways. So, just be careful. And so nothing would be on any surface by the time it reached you in the mail. But I still don't want to, if I somehow were sick, I didn't want to take myself out of my home and, put that out there into the world. So hashtag flatten the curve. I am all about that. But yes, I'll be making an announcement over the next few days that yes, I can start shipping again. So I'm really excited about that. Just know it'll probably be a little slower. It won't be as fast as of a turnaround as you guys were used to, just because I don't want to have to go out there every day. The less I can go out, the better. I mean, I want to go outside, but it just I understand why we're doing what we're doing, and I'm there for that. So yeah. I hope you guys listened to me babble, enjoyed listening to me babble for like 45 minutes. It's definitely weird for me. I'm not used to talking for this long. um, but yeah, I hope if you had questions, you joined us and you heard the answers to your questions and feel satisfied with the responses. And if not, feel free to shoot me a message and say, hey, answer this again, or answer this other question, or talk about this. Because, yeah, I think it'd be fun to do. Somebody also suggested setting up a Discord server, which I think would be great. And because then it also would allow other folks to chime in and then make me feel maybe a little less self-conscious. But thank you, Don, for being so sweet, for saying that you're enjoying the babble. But yeah, because then folks could just kind of chime in, or we can all share, hey, this is what I'm working on right now. This is what I'm not working on, but I want to work on. And yeah, I have not done anything ever with Discord. And I also don't know how many of you have. I thought YouTube would certainly be the easiest for just kind of getting started, since anybody can watch the YouTube video without really like setting complicated things up. I know you need an account in order to chat, but other than that, yeah. So yeah, if there's other questions you want, if you're like, hey, that was a fun hangout, I'll listen to you babble again next week, let me know and we will definitely do that. But I hope I was able to give you guys something nice to listen to while you craft, take your mind off of the news, everything that's going on. And yeah, I hope you have a cozy rest of your Saturday and a wonderful weekend. And I wish you all well. Happy weaving, and thank you so much for joining me. And thank you so much for yeah, there wasn't much technical stuff going on, so that's great. I'll finish up with show you the other cat since you did get to see Zila. So before I let you go, I will show you the dad, the cat who was getting yelled at and hissed at by the other one that you saw. So he's in the cat-sized bed. Hey, buddy. Hi, I know. Did I wake you up from your nap? Yeah, I guess I probably did. So, yeah, those are my fur babies, and they are making this time at home very comfortable and awesome. So, okay. Once again, thank you for joining me, and have a great weekend. Be well. Bye.